I should have known the day was going too smoothly. You ever have one of those rare mornings where everything just clicks? The coffee tastes right, the traffic lights are all green, and even the airport security line feels like a personal favor from the universe. That was me, completely unaware that fate had decided to throw me into a midair HOA meeting. My son and I were flying out for his college orientation in Oregon. Big moment for us. I'd saved up, upgraded our seats, nothing fancy, just the kind that let you stretch your legs and pretend you're not crammed in a metal tube with 200 strangers. I wanted the trip to be perfect for him. You know, one last dad and son adventure before he disappeared into dorm life and started calling only when his laundry piled up. We boarded early, found our seats, and I was feeling good, proud, relaxed, and maybe even a little emotional. That lasted about 3 minutes. Because then, from behind me, I heard that voice. Sharp, nasal, and unmistakably irritated, the kind of voice that sounds like it's been professionally trained to ruin your day. "Excuse me," she said, "but I believe you're sitting in my seat." I froze. I knew that tone. I knew that rhythm. It was the same one I'd heard in every HOA meeting since the day I moved into Maple Ridge Estates. The same voice that once fined me for having a garden gnome that disrupted the aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood. I turned around and my stomach dropped. There she was, Karen, my HOA president. You ever see someone outside their natural habitat and it just feels wrong? Like spotting your teacher in a grocery store or your boss in gym shorts. That's what this was, except worse. Because Karen wasn't just an HOA president. She was the self-declared guardian of neighborhood morality. The type who memorized the bylaws like they were scripture and quoted them whenever someone left their trash bin visible for more than 3 minutes. And now she was standing in the airplane aisle, designer sunglasses perched on her head, holding her boarding pass like it was a royal decree. "Karen," I said, blinking. She looked me up and down, squinting. "Oh, it's you." The way she said it, you'd think I'd just vandalized her mailbox again. I smiled awkwardly. "Small world, huh?" She didn't smile back. Instead, she looked at my son, who was already seated by the window, earbuds in, completely oblivious. "I think you're in the wrong seat," she said, waving her ticket. "I was supposed to be here." I glanced at my own boarding pass. Seat 4A, the same number on the headrest in front of me. "Pretty sure this one's mine," I said calmly. Karen's eyes narrowed. "That can't be right. I was told I'd be upgraded." She said it like she was talking about a divine right, like being HOA president automatically came with airline privileges. The flight attendant, a young woman who clearly hadn't yet built the emotional armor required for dealing with people like Karen, stepped over with a polite smile. "Can I see your ticket, ma'am?" Karen handed it over, and I could see the attendant's smile falter. "Actually, ma'am, your seat is 26B, that's toward the back of the aircraft." Karen's jaw dropped. "That's economy." "Yes, ma'am," the attendant replied, trying not to flinch. Karen turned back to me as if I had something to do with this. "I was promised an upgrade. I'm on the HOA board. I handle community affairs. Surely there's been a mistake." The flight attendant checked again, her professional smile twitching. "I'm afraid that's the only seat listed for you, ma'am." You could feel the tension building. The passengers nearby had gone quiet, some pretending to read, others openly watching. My son looked up from his phone and mouthed the word seriously. I gave him a look that said, "Brace yourself." Karen wasn't backing down. "I'll have you know," she said loudly, "that I'm not accustomed to being treated this way. I always travel comfortably." The attendant kept her voice gentle but firm. "Ma'am, please proceed to your assigned seat so we can finish boarding." Karen huffed, clutching her designer tote like a protest flag. "I'll be reporting this to corporate." I just smiled and said, "Be sure to CC the HOA." A few passengers snorted, trying to hold in their laughter. Karen glared at me like I'd just insulted her family lineage. She finally stomped down the aisle toward the back, muttering about ungrateful neighbors and rules being ignored. I watched her go, shaking my head. The absurdity of it all hit me. Out of every flight, on every day, across every possible route, she had to be on mine. The flight attendant leaned in and whispered, "You know her." "Unfortunately," I said, "she runs the neighborhood like it's a dictatorship." The attendant chuckled under her breath. "Well, good luck, it's a long flight." As the plane doors closed and the engines roared to life, I tried to relax. But something told me this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Because if there's one thing I've learned about HOA presidents like Karen, it's that they don't give up easily. They don't forget. And they definitely don't sit quietly in economy when they believe the world owes them first class. I adjusted my seatbelt and glanced at my son. He had no idea what kind of storm was brewing behind us. And as the plane lifted off the ground, I made a silent wish that we'd make it through the flight without turning it into a full-blown neighborhood hearing. But deep down, I already knew better. Because wherever Karen goes, rules follow. And when rules don't work in her favor, chaos does. I thought maybe, just maybe, that was the end of it. Karen had been sent to her seat in row 26, justice had been served, and peace would finally rule the cabin. But 5 minutes into the flight, as soon as the seatbelt sign turned off, I saw her blonde head bobbing up the aisle again like a shark fin cutting through calm water. She was on a mission, and I was the target. She stopped right beside me, hands on hips, that fake neighborly smile plastered across her face. "You know, I think there's been a mistake," she said, loud enough for half the plane to hear. "My seat was supposed to be here next to yours." I blinked, pretty sure we settled that already, Karen. She tilted her head. I double-checked with the gate agent. They said something about an upgrade that didn't process correctly. I knew exactly what that meant. It never existed. But Karen wasn't someone who accepted reality when it didn't fit her version of events. The flight attendant, bless her patience, appeared again like a weary guardian angel. "Ma'am, as I mentioned earlier, you're seated in 26B. This is row 4. Karen gave a forced laugh, like she was humoring a child. "I understand that, but I was told by management I could move up if there were available seats." "There aren't," the attendant said flatly. Karen leaned closer to me, lowering her voice but not her attitude. "Wouldn't it be nice," she said sweetly, "if you and your son let me sit here instead? It would show such community spirit." I stared at her. Community spirit? We're on a plane, not in the clubhouse. Her smile faltered. "It's about respect. You're a resident, I'm the HOA president." I cut her off. "Karen, this isn't Maple Ridge Estates. You don't run the sky." The guy sitting across the aisle snorted so hard his soda almost came out of his nose. A few others chuckled quietly. Karen's face twitched. She straightened up and announced, "I'll be reporting this to Delta Corporate. This is harassment." She spun around dramatically and marched back down the aisle. My son leaned over and whispered, "Is she for real?" "Unfortunately," I said, "that's her natural state." We tried to focus on the in-flight movie, but every few minutes I caught her reflection in the TV screen, packing, muttering, making calls. At one point, I swear she was taking pictures of the seat numbers up front like she was gathering evidence for a lawsuit. About 20 minutes later, she made her comeback. Only this time she was recording. Phone out, camera pointed directly at me and my son. "Everyone," she announced to the cabin, "take note. This man has taken my rightful seat and the airline refuses to do anything about it." The flight attendant froze mid-step. "Ma'am, please stop filming other passengers." Karen ignored her completely. "You can't hide the truth. People need to know how HOA officials are treated in this country." That line actually broke me. I started laughing, couldn't help it. "Karen, no one cares about your HOA title up here. You're not governing the clouds." Gasps and giggles rippled through the rows. A few passengers started whispering. The flight attendant tried again, firmer this time. "Ma'am, put your phone away or I'll have to notify the captain." Karen's voice shot up an octave. "Notify whoever you want, I know my rights." At that point, I leaned back, closed my eyes, and muttered, "This is going to be a long flight." The attendant finally managed to talk her down, but not before Karen dramatically declared, "You'll regret treating me this way." Then she stomped back down the aisle for the third time. When things finally quieted, my son looked over, deadpan. "Dad, this feels like one of your HOA meetings with her." I sighed. "Yeah, except this time there's no coffee or donuts to soften the pain." We both chuckled, but under the laughter I could feel tension brewing. Karen wasn't the kind of person who lost gracefully. She was probably already planning her next move, something petty, something that would make a statement. About an hour into the flight, as the crew began serving drinks, I saw her whispering to another flight attendant near the galley. She was gesturing toward me, shaking her head like I'd committed some crime. The attendant nodded politely but didn't look convinced. My son nudged me. "She's talking about you." I didn't even turn my head. I know, let her file her little midair complaint. But I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't done, not even close. A few minutes later, the same attendant came to me and said quietly, "Sir, the passenger in 26B believes there's been a misunderstanding. She insists her seat was supposed to be upgraded." I smiled. "You mean she insists on being Karen?" The attendant bit her lip, clearly trying not to laugh. "We're handling it, just hang tight." I thanked her, but as she walked away, I caught Karen's smirk from down the aisle. She gave me that look she always gives right before issuing a citation, the one that says you might have won this round, but the board will hear about it. Only this wasn't Maple Ridge. There was no board here. Just gravity, an audience, and 4 hours left in the sky with a woman who believed rules only applied when she wrote them. And as I sipped my ginger ale, I could almost hear her plotting from 20 rows back. Something told me, before this flight landed, Karen was going to find a way to turn this trip into another one of her HOA crusades. And when she did, I'd be ready. I tried convincing myself she'd finally settled down. Maybe she'd realized how ridiculous this was. Maybe the recycled airplane air had calmed her nerves. But the thing about Karen is that silence isn't peace, it's plotting. It had been almost an hour since the last confrontation, and for a blissful stretch, everything was normal. The hum of the engines, the low chatter, the occasional ding of the service cart. My son had his headphones on, half watching a movie, half dozing off. I started to relax. Maybe I'd been wrong about her. Maybe, by some miracle, she'd accepted her seat in economy and was reading a self-help book about humility. Then I heard it, the unmistakable tone of Karen in full campaign mode. "I need to speak to someone in charge," she said, her voice slicing through the calm like a lawnmower on Sunday morning. "This is completely unacceptable." I leaned into the aisle just enough to see her standing near the galley, cornering a flight attendant. She was holding her phone out, screen glowing, scrolling through what looked like screenshots. "They confirmed it right here," she said. "Delta's system must have messed up. I was supposed to be in seat 4A, that man stole it." That man, she said it like I was some criminal mastermind. The flight attendant, clearly exhausted, said in the politest tone she could muster, "Ma'am, there's no record of any upgrade on your ticket. I've checked 3 times. Karen's voice got sharper. "Then maybe you should check with someone who knows what they're doing." I saw the attendant's smile falter, that tiny twitch that happens when a person reaches their emotional limit but still has to pretend they're fine. "I assure you, ma'am, I do." Karen folded her arms. "Well, I'll just call corporate myself." And she did, right there in the middle of the flight. She dialed some number, put it on speaker, and began explaining how she'd been wrongfully downgraded by an incompetent system and disrespected by an uncooperative neighbor. I sank into my seat. My son looked at me and whispered, "She's calling customer service on a plane." I nodded, classic Karen move. She was packing now, her voice carrying through the cabin. Passengers were whispering, rolling their eyes, or filming discreetly. I caught a guy 2 rows behind me holding his phone at an angle that definitely wasn't casual. This was going to end up online. Finally, the flight attendant approached her again, voice calm but firm. "Ma'am, if you can't comply with flight regulations, I'll have to notify the captain." Karen snapped, "Go ahead, I'll notify the board." "The board?" the attendant asked, confused. "The HOA board," Karen said, as if that meant something. "We have connections." At that point, someone actually laughed out loud. It wasn't me this time, though I was close. The flight attendant blinked slowly, then said, "Please return to your seat, ma'am." Karen huffed, hung up her phone, and glared down the aisle. Her eyes locked on me. "You think this is funny?" she said, loud enough that everyone in the front half of the plane turned. I shrugged a little. She pointed her finger like she was issuing a fine. "You're setting a terrible example for your son." I smiled. Well, at least he's learning how not to behave in public. The chuckles from nearby passengers turned into stifled laughter. Karen's face went red. For a moment, I thought she might actually explode. But instead, she gave me a look I'd seen many times before at HOA meetings. The look she gives right before writing someone up for violating an imaginary rule. She leaned down close enough that I could smell her overly sweet perfume. "You'll regret this," she whispered. "You always do." Then she turned and stormed off to the back again. The attendant passed by a minute later and gave me a sympathetic smile. "We're doing what we can," she said quietly. "She's a handful." "Try living 2 houses down from her," I said. She chuckled softly before moving on, but the damage was done. The atmosphere in the cabin had shifted. Everyone was on edge now, waiting to see what Karen would do next. I tried to relax, but I couldn't shake the feeling she wasn't finished. Karen didn't just make scenes, she escalated them. And sure enough, 20 minutes later, she returned. Not walking this time, storming. She had her phone up again, recording. "This is the man," she said, narrating like it was a crime documentary. "He refused to surrender my rightful seat. He mocked me. This will go viral." My son groaned, "Dad, she's filming us." I exhaled, looked straight at her, and said, "Karen, if you're going to post it online, make sure you tag me. I could use the followers." That broke the tension. The whole section laughed, some even clapping. Karen froze mid-recording, realizing she'd lost control of the narrative. Her lips trembled, her eyes darted around, searching for backup, but no one was on her side anymore. The flight attendant approached once more. "Ma'am, please stop filming and return to your seat, or I'll have to call the captain up front." Karen glared at me one last time. "You think this is over?" I smiled. "We haven't even landed yet." She finally stomped back toward economy, muttering to herself. As she disappeared, I leaned toward my son. "She's not done," I said. He nodded, eyes wide. "I know, she's loading up for round 4. I laughed softly, but it was the uneasy kind. Because he was right. Karen never quits halfway. She was brewing something. And I had the distinct feeling whatever came next was going to make this flight one to remember, for everyone on board. Just when I thought the evening couldn't get any more awkward, the principal's voice crackled over the microphone. The chatter in the audience softened to a hush. The stage lights dimmed slightly, and the air filled with that quiet, nervous energy every parent knows before their child's name gets called. My son, Tyler, was up for a special recognition award, something neither of us had expected. He'd kept that little secret from me, probably to surprise me. But apparently, Karen knew. I caught her shifting in her seat, adjusting her pearls like she was preparing for a spotlight that wasn't hers. She whispered something to her husband, then leaned forward with that familiar smirk. "You know," she said, "the school really should have seated board members closer to the stage. We represent this community." I clenched my jaw and forced a polite smile. "I'm just here to watch my son," I said quietly. She gave a little laugh, the kind of condescending giggle that made you want to roll your eyes so hard they'd never come back down. "Oh, of course you are. I just thought you'd want to know that we've been considering making graduation seating more equitable. Some people shouldn't be sitting in seats they didn't earn." The nerve, my seat wasn't assigned by the HOA, it was assigned by the school. But in Karen's world, everything was hers to control, even the air we breathed. Then the principal said Tyler's name. My heart leapt, and before I knew it, I was clapping, cheering louder than anyone around me. Tyler stood up straight, that shy smile spreading across his face. He looked so proud walking across that stage. And then something happened that froze everyone in the front section. Karen stood up. At first, I thought she was applauding too, but then she started walking toward the aisle. I watched, stunned, as she gestured to the ushers near the stage. She whispered something, pointed at my son, then pointed back toward the row where I was sitting. What on earth was she doing? The usher's confused face said it all. He nodded uncertainly and started back toward me. I felt my stomach drop as he leaned in and whispered, "Ma'am, someone said you might be sitting in the wrong section." I looked past him toward Karen. She wasn't even trying to hide her smug grin. Her husband sat there pretending to look at the program, clearly embarrassed but unwilling to stop her. I took a slow breath. "This is my assigned seat," I said firmly, showing him the printed ticket with my name and row number. He nodded apologetically and turned back toward her. She frowned. "Well," she said loudly enough for half the section to hear, "if the school can't even keep track of proper seating, maybe I should handle it next year myself." People nearby were starting to notice. A few whispered. One mom muttered, "Oh my God, that's Karen." The principal, unaware of the chaos below, handed Tyler his certificate and gestured for him to stand on stage for photos. My boy looked so proud, until he saw Karen walking back down the aisle, shooting him a glare that could melt steel. When Tyler returned to his seat, he leaned over and whispered, "Mom, what's going on?" I smiled through gritted teeth. "Nothing, sweetheart, just focus on your night." But inside, I was boiling. As the ceremony continued, Karen kept glancing at me, almost daring me to react. She whispered to the woman next to her, loudly enough for me to hear, "Some people just don't understand boundaries, always taking what isn't theirs." By the time the ceremony ended, I was ready to leave, but Karen was. She blocked the aisle with her purse and her perfect posture. "You know," she said sweetly, "we're hosting a little gathering at our place for the board after this. Maybe next year you can earn a seat up front the right way." I just stared at her, too tired to feed her drama. Then Tyler, bless him, spoke up. "Mrs. Grant," he said clearly, "I think my mom earned her seat tonight. The principal said I got the award because of her." Karen froze. Her fake smile cracked for the first time all night. I took my son's hand, walked right past her, and didn't look back. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. Because what happened next, thanks to a few photos and a viral video, made Karen wish she could disappear from the community she claimed to run. And I didn't have to lift a single finger to make it happen. The next morning, I thought the whole thing was behind us. I made coffee, opened the curtains, and planned to spend the day quietly celebrating Tyler's win. But that peaceful plan lasted all of 8 minutes. My phone started buzzing, first one message, then another, then dozens. Apparently, someone had uploaded a clip from last night's graduation to social media. At first, I figured it was just the usual proud parent kind of video. But when I opened it, I nearly spit out my coffee. The clip started with Tyler's name being called, followed by him walking proudly across the stage. Then the camera shifted, catching Karen marching up the aisle, waving her arms, whispering to the usher, and pointing straight at me. The video cut to a wide shot of confused parents starring, whispers spreading through the crowd, and then the usher returning to confirm my seat was correct. And finally, it caught Karen saying, clear as day, "Some people don't belong in seats they didn't earn." The comments were brutal. "Wow, HOA Karen strikes again. Who acts like that at a graduation? Lady, sit down. It's not your kid's day." Within an hour, the video had over 20,000 views. By lunchtime, the local news station had shared it with the headline, "HOA board member causes scene at graduation over seating dispute." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I wasn't the one who filmed it. I wasn't the one who posted it. But everyone knew who Karen was, and the internet didn't take kindly to people who humiliate others for no reason. I tried to stay out of it. I didn't comment, didn't share, didn't even tell Tyler what was happening. But the story had legs. By afternoon, someone had dug up old HOA meeting clips where Karen lectured homeowners about community standards and respect. They paired those clips with last night's footage and called it Karen's greatest hits. She was becoming famous for all the wrong reasons. That evening, while Tyler was outside throwing a ball with the neighbor kids, I saw Karen's husband packing in their driveway, phone glued to his ear. He looked defeated, shaking his head, then glancing toward my house like I'd somehow orchestrated the whole thing. Then my phone rang. It was Karen. "Hi, this is Karen Grant," she said sharply, as if I didn't have her number saved. "I assume you've seen what's happening online." "I have," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "It's unfortunate." "Unfortunate?" she snapped. "It's defamation. Someone edited that video to make me look like some kind of villain. You need to tell people the truth." "The truth," I repeated. "Karen, all I did was sit in my assigned seat." She hesitated. "Yes, well, you know how social media twists things. I just think you should clarify that I wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. You could post something. Tell them we're friends." I couldn't help but laugh a little. "We're not friends, Karen, and I didn't post the video." There was silence on the line. Then she said, "You're making a mistake. The HOA doesn't take kindly to public drama. If this continues, it won't reflect well on your family." That's when something in me snapped. I'd spent months keeping my head down, paying her fines, ignoring her snide remarks, pretending her petty rules didn't bother me. But she'd humiliated my son in front of his classmates, and now she was trying to pin her own downfall on me. "Karen," I said slowly, "you might want to focus on fixing your reputation before worrying about mine." And then I hung up. By the next morning, the clip had hit 500,000 views. A talk show host even mentioned it, joking about the HOA lady who tried to evict a mom from her seat. Memes popped up everywhere. People photoshopped Karen into movie posters, seat wars, the chair strikes back. It was relentless. When I went to check the mail, I saw her car pulling out of the driveway. She didn't even look my way. For the first time since I'd moved to that neighborhood, Karen Grant, the woman who never stopped talking, was completely silent. But the story wasn't done yet, because what she did next to clear her name turned the entire HOA upside down and gave me the chance to end this feud once and for all. For a few days, it felt like the entire neighborhood had turned upside down. People who used to avoid me suddenly waved when I walked by. Neighbors who never spoke a word at HOA meetings started dropping hints like, "Saw the video, good for you for keeping calm," or "About time someone stood up to her." Meanwhile, Karen had gone radio silent. No morning jogs in her matching tracksuit, no garden committee patrols, not even her usual Friday emails reminding us about aesthetic uniformity. It was peaceful, almost eerie. But quiet never lasts long with people like her. On the fourth morning, as I was coming back from the grocery store, I saw her car parked halfway in my driveway. She was standing there in a pastel cardigan, clutching a white bakery box, like she was about to sell me forgiveness in the form of cupcakes. "Morning, Karen," I said, balancing my grocery bag. She smiled too wide. "Oh, hi, I just wanted to stop by for a quick chat. I brought something for you and your son." She held out the box. "Lemon squares, homemade." I glanced at the box, then at her. "Thanks, but we're good." Her smile flickered. "Please just hear me out." I sighed and set the groceries down on the porch. "All right, 2 minutes." She took a deep breath, rehearsed like she'd practiced in the mirror. "I wanted to personally apologize for how things unfolded at graduation. It was a misunderstanding. You see, I was simply trying to make sure everyone was seated correctly. The ushers were confused." I crossed my arms. "The ushers weren't confused, Karen, you were." Her smile tightened. "Well, that's your interpretation, but unfortunately people online don't understand context. They're attacking me, my family, my position on the board. It's gotten out of hand." "So this isn't really about an apology," I said. "You're just trying to do damage control." That made her drop the sweet act. "Look," she said sharply, "you could help fix this. If you just post something, say you misunderstood me, it would all calm down." I almost laughed. "You humiliated my son in front of hundreds of people, tried to get me moved out of my seat, and now that the internet doesn't like you, you want me to save your reputation." She blinked, caught off guard. "You make it sound worse than it was." "Karen," I said quietly, "it was worse than it sounds." For a second, she just stood there, gripping that bakery box like it was a shield. Then she sighed. If that's how you feel, I suppose there's nothing more to say. But remember, I'm still the HOA president, and I have responsibilities to this community. Ah, there it was, the real Karen. She turned to leave, but paused halfway down the walkway. You know, she said, not even looking back, people forgive faster when you play nice. And then she got in her car and drove off. Later that afternoon, I checked my email, and there it was, a new HOA notice. Subject line, urgent maintenance violation. Apparently, my mailbox post was 2 inches above the approved height. I laughed out loud. She couldn't help herself. Even in digital exile, she was still playing her petty games. But she didn't realize something. People were watching her now, closely. That evening, one of the board members, a man named Greg, called me. He sounded tired. Look, I just wanted you to know the board, having an emergency meeting tomorrow. Karen's behavior, it's not going over well. We've had a dozen complaints since that video. Homeowners are demanding a vote. A vote, I asked. Yeah, he said, to remove her as HOA president. For a second, I couldn't even speak. After years of her running this place like a dictatorship, it was finally catching up to her. I thanked Greg, hung up, and just sat there staring out at the quiet street. I didn't feel triumphant exactly, just relieved. Maybe karma worked after all. But Karen wasn't the type to surrender quietly. When the board gathered the next evening, she didn't show up empty-handed or empty of strategy. She had one last, desperate move to play. And it involved me. The next evening, the HOA meeting was packed tighter than I'd ever seen it. Normally, these things were ghost towns, 5 bored homeowners, a pot of lukewarm coffee, and Karen talking for 45 minutes about garbage bin placement. But tonight, every seat was taken. People lined the back wall, phones in hand, waiting for a showdown. Even the local news van was parked outside. I arrived a few minutes early with Tyler, mostly because he begged to come. I just want to see her face, he'd said. I didn't argue. He'd earned it. Karen sat at the head of the table like nothing had happened. Perfect posture, pearl necklace, that same fixed smile that said, I still control this neighborhood. But there was tension in her eyes, and for once she didn't have her usual entourage of bored loyalists backing her up. Greg, the vice president, cleared his throat. We'll get started, he said. This meeting was called to address recent conduct by board members and concerns from the community regarding professionalism and representation. Karen cut in smoothly. Yes, and I'd like to begin with my own statement. Of course she would. She stood up, clasped her hands, and turned to face the crowd like she was at a political rally. I understand there been misinformation circulating about me, she began. A video taken out of context during a very emotional night. I want to be clear. I hold the utmost respect for all members of this community, including those who have misunderstood my intentions. A few people chuckled. Someone near the back whispered, she's really gonna pretend that video didn't happen. Karen pressed on. I was simply trying to assist school staff during a moment of confusion. Unfortunately, that kindness was misinterpreted and maliciously edited to make me appear, well, unkind. I sat quietly, arms crossed, while she kept spinning her web of self-pity. Then she turned her attention directly to me. And I'd like to personally acknowledge one of our residents, Mrs. Hill, who was involved in that incident. I think it's time we clear the air publicly, don't you? All eyes turned to me. Tyler stiffened in his seat. Karen smiled, the kind of smile that hid a knife. I invite you to tell everyone that you understand this was all a misunderstanding. I took a slow breath. Karen, I said evenly, the video wasn't edited. You walked up in the middle of a graduation, told an usher I didn't belong, and embarrassed my son in front of the entire school. You don't get to call that a misunderstanding. The room went silent. For the first time, Karen's smile faltered. Well, that's one version, she said. No, Greg interjected. That's the version, it's on video. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Karen's face turned a deep shade of pink. Enough, she snapped. This meeting isn't about gossip, it's about leadership. She slammed a folder down on the table. And as HOA president, I still have the authority to enforce community standards, which brings me to another matter. Mrs. Hill has a mailbox that's out of compliance, 2 inches above regulation height. The laughter stopped. People stared at her stunned. I blinked. You're really doing this now? Karen crossed her arms. Rules are rules. Greg pinched the bridge of his nose. Karen, this is exactly the behavior people are tired of. You're using HOA power to settle personal grudges. That's not leadership. Excuse me, she said. I've done nothing but protect the standards of this community. From the back of the room, someone shouted, You embarrassed us all on the news. Another voice followed. You fined me for a bird feeder. Then came another. You told my daughter her driveway chalk was aesthetic. The crowd was turning on her fast. Greg raised his voice. All right, everyone, motion on the table to remove Karen Grant as HOA president effective immediately. A dozen hands shot up, then more, nearly the entire room. Karen looked around wildly, her lips trembling. You can't, this is my neighborhood, I built this community. Tyler leaned toward me and whispered, Guess they're rebuilding it without her. When the final count was read, it wasn't even close. She was out. Karen stood frozen, eyes darting between the crowd and me. You'll regret this, she said, her voice cracking. All of you. But nobody responded. As she stormed out, flashes went off. Phones recording her retreat, the same way they'd captured her downfall in that auditorium. It was poetic, really. The woman who spent years policing everyone's lives was finally being watched herself. I thought that was the end of it. But as I'd soon learn, Karen had one last card to play, one that would make her wish she'd just stayed quiet and taken the loss. I thought it was finally over. After the vote, the air in the neighborhood felt lighter, like someone had finally opened the windows after years of being trapped in stale air. People were smiling again. Greg took over as interim president, and for the first time, the HOA meetings were short, calm, and free of lectures about mailbox colors or lawn lengths. But peace never lasts long when Karen's involved. 3 days after her removal, I found a folded note taped to my door. No envelope, no signature, just my name written in perfect, looping cursive. Inside, the message read, Enjoy your little victory. I'll be back before you know it. I sighed and tossed it into the trash. Empty threats were her specialty. But then, strange things started happening. My trash bins were accidentally skipped by the collection truck. HOA documents went missing from Greg's email. And late one night, someone filed a public complaint about fraudulent residency records tied to my property. Greg called me the next morning. She's trying to get you investigated, he said. She told the county office you forged your address to avoid paying higher HOA fees. I nearly dropped my coffee. She's still at it. Yeah, he said, but this time she might have gone too far. Because when the county clerk reviewed her complaint, they noticed something. Karen had been using an HOA business account to send in official forms after her removal. She'd accessed files that weren't supposed to be available to her anymore. That triggered an automatic audit of the HOA's internal records. And that's when everything unraveled. Turns out, Karen had been quietly reimbursing herself for community expenses that didn't exist, thousands of dollars over the last 2 years. Landscaping fees, catering invoices, maintenance costs, every one of them linked to a fake vendor she'd created under her maiden name. Greg called me again a few days later. The auditors found it, he said. She's finished. When the story hit the local paper, the headline was brutal. Former HOA president under investigation for embezzlement. They even used her graduation photo for comparison, the one where she was pointing and yelling mid-aisle. The irony was hard to miss. Karen tried to deny everything at first, claiming it was an accounting mistake. But once the authorities got involved, there was no escaping the truth. Neighbors she'd fined for trivial things, like painting their fences the wrong shade of beige, were now forwarding her threats and emails to the investigators. She wasn't just unpopular anymore, she was exposed. One afternoon, as I was raking leaves, her husband drove by slowly. He didn't wave, didn't glare, just gave me this quiet, defeated look. Then I noticed the moving truck parked in their driveway. By sunset, the house was empty. Karen had finally disappeared. Tyler came out with his football under his arm and said, "Guess she's gone, huh?" "Looks like it," I said. He grinned. "Does that mean I can paint the mailbox blue now?" I laughed, maybe give it a week. Over the next few weeks, life in the neighborhood returned to something close to normal. Kids played outside again without being told their bikes were violating visual symmetry. Neighbors talked on their lawns instead of whispering behind curtains. Even the local newsletter started including real community news instead of HOA reminders. And every once in a while, someone would stop me at the grocery store or at the park and say, "Hey, weren't you the mom from that graduation video?" I'd just smile and say, "Yeah, that was me." They nod, smile, and say, "Good for you." It wasn't the kind of fame anyone asked for, but it came with one satisfying truth. People remembered the lesson. The woman who demanded control over every inch of our neighborhood lost everything because she couldn't control herself. And as for me, I never had to raise my voice, start a fight, or break a rule. I just stood my ground. Sometimes that's all it takes to watch karma do its work. When I looked out at the now empty house across the street, I couldn't help but smile a little. The porch lights were off, the flower beds overgrown, the perfect lawn starting to fade. For the first time in years, the silence on our street wasn't tense, it was peaceful. And I knew Karen was out there somewhere, probably telling herself she'd been wronged, probably blaming everyone but herself. But deep down, I think she knew the truth. What happened next didn't make her wish she could disappear. It made her disappear. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one. The truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.